Coming in number 5, we've got the Rat Men of Southend. Who could forget Dear Rat Boy, am I right? Well, if you forgot him before, prepare to have some imagery burned into your brain for life. There are actually a couple of tales referring to a rat man from Southend, so why not talk about both? The first is a little more fun and a little less tragic. Tragic nonetheless, but more juicy details and less cold-blooded murder. So according to some, at one point, the mayor of Southend was indeed a rat bastard. Not literally, but in the way that he constantly and unrepentantly cheated on his wife. Poor woman, although she did choose to marry a politician. So as divine punishment for this mayor's consistent adultery, his son was born with a rat face and a long tail. This did not sit well with the social climbing couple, but what could they do? For a while they would feed their son the only thing he craved: meat. This rat boy would chow down on raw flesh like nobody else. Eventually they realized they couldn't possibly raise a meat-eating rat lad in full view of the public, so the mayor had an underpass with secret chambers built just for his rat son. And for the rest of his days, Rat Boy lived in the dank, dark underpass, attempting escape and scaring anyone who dared pass through. He eventually grew into a rat man in his own right, and even killed a few folks for food. The legend persists, with some night tours insisting that they stroll the underpass in case he decides to come out at night. Yeesh. The second story has more to do with the man and also rats, but I'll tell it anyway. Apparently there was an old man also living below an underpass. He had no belongings save for his clothes and a blanket, and he did his best to stay hidden away. However, one day a group of rowdy teenagers came across this man and mercilessly beat him. Once he was incapacitated, they stole his blanket and left him to die in the cold. Unable to move due to his injuries, the man eventually did succumb to hypothermia. Following his death, hundreds of rats emerged from the shadows to consume his lifeless body. Thus began the legend of the Rat Man, consumed by the scurrying dark masses that plague the city. Some say that you can still hear strange scrabbly noises near that underpass. Could it be the descendants of those rats looking for more human flesh? Or maybe it's the ghost of the Rat Man himself, crawling around, disemboweled and confused. Coming in number 4, we've got fairy dogs. Doesn't that just sound lovely? Like a little dachshund puppy with little Tinkerbell wings? Well, that is not what these fairies are like. Of course, the fairies that folks see in Disney movies are much friendlier than the ones from folklore. Fairies of legend are often mischievous, looking to cause trouble in best case scenarios and trying to ruin people in harsher cases. So it stands to reason that fairy dogs might not be so sociable. No belly rubs or ear scratches will make these fearsome canines friendly. See, there's an idea out there that crossroads are the door to another world. If you make the wrong choice or linger too long, you might find yourself staring down a fairy, a demon, or a god. Not necessarily what the average person wants, you know? These otherworldly beings usually live their lives unseen and unsensed by us, but at crossroads their actions might become more apparent. Some crossroads might even feature a fairy dog or two. These four-legged fiends guard the entrance. They're known for glowing bright green, making sure you don't mistake them for a regular dog. And if you see one, it's best to turn around. They'll bark twice as a warning. Alright, 2, remember that. And don't worry if you think you might miss one of these barks, they're as loud and commanding as they come. But if you do not heed this warning and the dog gets out a third bark, you are doomed. Sure, good things come in threes, just not this time. Hey guys, if you're liking the video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, it really helps us with the algorithm. On with the list.
Number 3 on this list is the Kraken. We have one of the most famous folklore creatures here, guys, that as we know now, turned out to be real. The Kraken was especially big in Norse culture. All of those people up there in the Nordic regions feared this wicked beast, as it was said to be able to pull down entire ships with hundreds of men on board. Instances where exactly that happened did actually transpire. Ships with tons of people on them that were literally made for battle would be out on the water, and then boom, Kraken attack and they're toasted. Except it wasn't really the Kraken now, was it? The Kraken looks very similar to an actual animal that we have in our world that is also super deadly and really strong. The giant squid. Giant squids, in case you couldn't tell from the name, are giant. They're pretty big. They are so big actually they would have had the capability to take down an old ship like this. In fact, we've even seen these beasts do some serious damage to submarines, and they're made of metal. They easily could have sunk a wooden boat from hundreds or thousands of years ago. And if you were a sailor on said wooden boat and you saw this massive creature with several tentacles sucking you to the bottom of the ocean, then you would probably exaggerate what happened as well too. It's very easy to see how the legend of the Kraken got started and started to snowball as more encounters with the giant squid happened. I'm glad that the Kraken isn't technically real, because the giant squid is already bad enough. Number 2 on this list is the Charybdis. What was initially thought to be a folkloric creature may have been real, but not exactly in the way that we might think. Caroline Beccia says, "Nothing is more frightening than being sucked underwater by a whirlpool that feeds on human flesh 3 times a day." The Charybdis first appeared in Homer's Odyssey. During this epic tale, Odysseus must sail between the 6-headed sea monster Scylla and the flesh-eating whirlpool Charybdis. These 2 dueling sea monsters attacked in intervals, much like a whirlpool's regular intervals of tidal activity. It sounds terrifying, but whirlpools that pull ships underwater really do happen. Known today as Garofalo, one is found in the strait between Italy's mainland and Sicily. Garofalo occurs when winds blow across the strait in opposition to the tides. This makes it technically not a whirlpool because there's no circular motion, but it does have the ability to wreak havoc on ships and pull humans into a watery grave. So this deadly creature was real, it just ended up not being a creature at all. Back in the times when these stories were written, there would have been many folklore legends about evil sea monsters that could pull brave sailors into the sea. The reality of the situation is though that the ships we had back then kinda sucked, and it was a lot easier for the weather and other conditions to sink the ships. That's why there were so many legends of monsters coming from the ocean for so long. Finally, number 1 on this list is the incubus demon. This demon is an evil demon who is thought to sneak into your home and have sexual relations with you as you're sleeping. This creature is real in a sense. It just so happens that it's actually in our minds. During the witch hunt craze of the 16th and 17th century, people had some really messed up ideas on how human reproduction occurred. One way was for a demon to steal a man's seed and impregnate a helpless woman during her sleep. The monster that stole the precious sperm was called a succubus, and the monster that implanted the sperm was called an incubus. The incubus would sit on top of your chest while you slept, making it impossible for you to move if you woke. Sort of like being assaulted by a possessed sexomniac. But before you condemn medieval people as crazed horn dogs trying to attack innocent women, there is a scientific basis for believing in such monsters. The condition is called sleep paralysis. During sleep paralysis, you are fully awake but cannot move or cry for help. It feels like you've had a stroke, but although it's terrifying, sleep paralysis is harmless. Most sleep experts attribute it to being caught between REM, rapid eye movement, and NREM, non-rapid eye movement sleep. Either way, before sleep stages were understood, we can see how our ancestors would have thought it was a demon sitting on your chest. So literally this demon creature that apparently attacked people was never real at all, it just felt extremely real from our minds. I've experienced sleep paralysis before, and although I didn't experience any demon thing, I can 100% see how people would have believed this back then. It could definitely have felt like that and would have got people on the lookout for this sick and twisted demon of the night.
Coming in at number 5, Ronwy. Ronwy, also known as Renove, is a Marquis and Great Earl of Hell, commanding 20 legions of demons. Whoa, that's quite the feat. Renove teaches art, rhetoric languages, and gives good and loyal servants the favour of friends and foes. Now this dude is straight up evil. He is often depicted as a monster wielding a staff. Not only that, but he is the taker of old souls, often coming to Earth to harvest souls of decrepit humans and animals near death. So if you're a fan of your grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, or people in general, dogs, cats, the neighbour's gerbil, perhaps don't summon this cretin into your life. Just a thought. Coming in at number 4, Kelpie. Originating in Scottish folklore, the Kelpie is the name given to the shape-shifting water spirits that inhabit the pools of Scotland. They are demons that appear as humans but also take the form of a horse. According to mythology, every lake in Scotland has a Kelpie spirit, even the Loch Ness. Some accounts state that the Kelpie have retained their hooves when appearing as humans, leading to their association with Satan. Now some have been known to be beautiful, majestic creatures. Others are known to prey on humans. Now, these beautiful creatures will kill you, so just like werewolves, Kelpie can be killed by shooting them with a silver bullet.
Coming in number 3, we've got the Knocker. You would think that mining is scary enough as is, right? Heading into underground tunnels to blast away at rocks until you find some useful materials, hopefully not getting caved in, probably not running out of oxygen, etc. Well, this dangerous career comes with its own share of folklore too, just to make sure that some unexplainable spooks become even spookier. The Knocker is a mining monster. Based on the sounds of underground work, it is a spirit that lives within the same tunnels that the helmet-wearing workers descend into every day. Apparently the knocker is the ghost of a tin miner. It's 2 feet tall with a big head, long beard, and arms that almost drag along the ground. Being the ghost of a miner, it carries all the necessary equipment from lamps to pickaxes. Folks familiar with mining might know about the knocking sounds that echo throughout. This is a very scary sound as it can often be indicative of a cave-in. The actual knocking came from the creaking of earth and timbers before giving way, but to some of the miners the noise came from these malevolent spirits attempting to knock down the walls. There are actually all sorts of knocker-related tales, ranging from benevolent to malevolent, but sometimes remaining largely benign. But the scariest additions are those who went around the different tunnels stealing equipment and food, leaving the miners in terrible situations. Sometimes they would even purposefully misdirect miners, leaving them lost in the labyrinth of mine shafts and passages. Worst of all, they're associated with mine fires, which are absolutely horrifying. So make sure you toss the last bite of your meat pie into the mine for the knockers, lest you find yourself in a whole world of trouble. Coming in at number 2, we've got boggarts. Nasty, nasty creatures these ones are. A lot of folks are familiar with them thanks to the Harry Potter universe, but the idea of rotten little buggers ruining everything has been around for a lot longer than that. Household spirits looking to cause as much trouble as possible, boggarts are something nobody ever wants to deal with. They're famous for making possessions disappear, causing milk to sour, and having dogs walk lame. Definitely not fun. And once you've found yourself in the upsetting company of one, good luck getting rid of it. They will stick with your family no matter where you go, no matter how far you run. Your things will keep disappearing, your food will keep going bad, and you'll always be haunted by the knowledge that an awful little shit is making all of it happening. But don't even think about reasoning with a boggart. Sure, they were once helpful brownies or silkies, but something offended them or caused them to feel mistreated, and now they are just pure bad. Even if you offer to make a deal or treat it nicely from now on, it will respond very negatively. It will get furious and wreck all of your stuff in one go instead of doing it mischievously over the course of many years. So yeah, it's like a poltergeist you can't escape, but somehow worse. Folks that have to deal with these, not happy folks. And finally at number 1, we've got Black Shuck. We've talked about fairy dogs earlier, but that was just the beginning. This is the true terror dog, the big, brutal bad boy, the canine carnivore fueled by carnage, a hate-eyed and vengeful black dog full of rage and malice. There are all sorts of variants based on where you are, from the Gargess to the Guy Trash to the Padfoot, but the best known is Black Shuck. See it and you are out of luck. This thing is the embodiment of Satan. Wherever it goes, destruction follows. A harbinger of doom with blazing red eyes. If you see one, you are supposed to hide or make sure not to look at it. If you neglect to avert your gaze, your luck will get so bad that you die within the year. Holy smokes, right? There's one tale from a Suffolk church that tells of a Black Shuck visit during 1577. The enormous dog came running in, killed a man and a boy, and caused the steeple to collapse through the roof. It then left in a hurry, leaving dark scorch marks on the door. And that was just one little tale. Even if you're a dog person, you do not want to run into one of these. Something tells me that a treat won't smooth things over. Coming in at number 5, we've got the Black Shuck. This unbelievable creature is no fairy dog, that's for sure, although those aren't anything to laugh about either. This is the true terror dog, the brutal big bad boy, the canine carnivore fueled by carnage, a hate-eyed and vengeful black dog full of rage and malice. There are all sorts of variants based on where you are, from the Gargess to the Guy Trash to the Padfoot, but the one best known could be the Black Shuck. Take one look and you're out of luck. Some say that this thing is the embodiment of Satan. Wherever it goes, destruction follows. A harbinger of doom with blazing red eyes. If you see one, you're supposed to hide or make sure not to look at it. If you neglect to avert your gaze, your luck will get so bad that you will die within the year. There's one tale of a Suffolk church that tells of a Black Shuck visit back in 1577. The enormous dog came running in, killed the man and boy, and caused the steeple to collapse through the roof. Then it left in a hurry, leaving dark scorch marks on the door. And that was just one little tale. Even if you are a dog person, you don't want to run into one of these. Something tells me a treat won't smooth things over. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Tsuchigumo. Monsters have been mashed for as long as we can remember, and it's not always a graveyard smash, mind you. Sometimes it's the combination of many real, living creatures to make something extra nightmarish. This is a beast with the body of a tiger, the limbs of a spider, and the face of a demon. Part real mammal, part real, albeit much smaller arachnid, and part mythical monster. Apparently Tsuchigumo were known for eating travelers as they made their way across the countryside. In the remote fields, no one can hear you scream. 1 or 2 traveling morsels wouldn't be enough for them either. In one tale, a powerful warrior took one down and sliced it open, to loot the body. This ancient hero was playing Dungeons and Dragons way before anyone else, setting the stage for countless boss encounters. This thing definitely reeks of big bad guy, although I don't know what kind of DM would unleash such a presence on Earth. Back to the story though. Inside the Tsuchigumo were 1990 skulls, 10 shy of 2,000. Unbelievable that it would eat so many and barely even digest the skulls. It's a little wasteful if you ask me.
Coming in at number 3, Lilith. Lilith is a demon from the ancient Sumerians and is truly one of the oldest known demons of all time, and that says a lot. Now it's highly debated where she first appeared. Some say in the Epic of Gilgamesh, yet she also appeared in Jewish texts around the same time. Lilith is often envisioned as a dangerous demon of the night, with a dangerous sexuality that spawned thousands of other demons. She is sexually wanton and steals babies in the darkness of the night. Not only that, but Lilith may be linked in part to a historically earlier class of female demons in ancient Mesopotamian religion. Coming in at number 2, Krampus. Oh, Krampus. Krampus has seemed to have garnered himself some fame over recent years, with Hollywood releasing a handful of movies about his demonic, heinous acts. Popular in Germanic folklore, Krampus in essence is the polar opposite of Santa Claus. He has long horns, sharp teeth, and an obscenely large tongue. He is described as half goat, half demon, and on December 5th each year he comes for all the bad children, capturing them and taking them away from their parents forever, as opposed to his counterpart, Saint Nick, who rewards well-behaved children with gifts. And lastly, in at number 1, Lucifer. Lucifer, meaning light bearer, is the demon most well known in folklore throughout all cultures. Not only that, but he's arguably the most terrifying. In biblical tradition, Lucifer was one of the seraphim that rebelled against God and was therefore cast out of heaven and into the depths of the underworld. Now, in some cultures, Lucifer is not equal to Satan, but instead rules over Satan, whereas in other cultures, they're both one and the same. In ancient Egypt and Babylonia, there are similar demons called Satyr and Zu, both of whom were cast out of heaven as well.
Swooping in at number 5, we've got the Kamaitachi. You like your limbs, right? You'd rather they didn't fly off in the blink of an eye? Well, then you'd be best to avoid these wind weasels as best you can. Also known as the sickle weasel, the Kamaitachi usually roams around on whirlwinds in groups of 3. Sometimes they're brothers, sometimes even triplets, but the trio aspect is pretty much immovable. These little fuzzy flayers like to run around and cut people's legs off. At the ankles or calves is the usual choice, but you never know. Their method of slicing and dicing is pretty ubiquitous. The first weasel will knock the victim down, the second will come through with a sickle and slice the leg off, then the third and final fellow will run through, sew up the wounds, and put some numbing medicine on the newly stumpified leg. This all happens so fast most folks don't even notice their legs are gone until they're staring up at the clouds. Blink and you'll miss it. At first the numbing agent makes it so there's no pain, but that will wear off eventually, and then you'll get to deal with the pain of having your legs hacked off and sewn up by a tiny mammal. Coming in at number 4, we've got Hyosube. Okay, are you ready for my quick description of this? You sure? Alright, this is an eggplant stealing filth goblin. Doesn't that sound just wonderful? These short, hairy, dirty, humanoid things run around like they own the place and kill a whole bunch of folks as a result. If you see one, you die. And they don't do a very good job of staying out of sight. Hide and seek, this is not. They wander about just waiting for an unfortunate soul to behold them. As they live out their terrible little lives, they also eat all of the eggplants in your garden. Oh, you were gonna make some baba ganoush. Well, too bad. Hyosube say, F your dip-based meals and F you too. All of the aubergines get consumed and they trample the fields for good measure. The jerks. The only way to avoid accidentally seeing one is to leave out some prime eggplants for them, and even this is hit and miss. For some reason, eating your crops and ruining your fields isn't enough, and Hyosube also like to use your bathtub. And like I mentioned earlier, they're very dirty little creatures. They're known for leaving behind ridiculous amounts of filth, like hair, dirt, and scum. To me, finding somebody else's filth in my bathroom is about an 8 out of 10 on the heebie-jeebies scale. So this is absolutely life-altering information. And by the way, you can't throw out the bathwater or it'll just kill you anyway. Honestly, I think I'd rather die than having to live with a tub full of goblin stink for the rest of my tenure.
Next up at number 3, Philiath. And whilst this particular entry may perhaps be a little familiar to you, it nonetheless still holds its own as one of the most intriguing cases of ancient folklore colliding with the modern era. In Scottish folklore, the Philiath, otherwise known in Scots as Amphiliath Moor, or otherwise known as the Big Grey Man of Ben Macdui, this creature is said to haunt the summit and mountain passes of Ben Macdui, the highest peak in the Cairngorms and the second highest peak in the whole of the British Isles. Obviously, down to his incredibly remote remote residents, few encounters with the grey man have occurred in folklore, but those who witnessed him described it as an impossibly tall figure, covered head to toe in short hair, surrounded by a strange, uneasy fog. As word of the grey man passed throughout the Highlands, remarks about hearing a strange, otherworldly howl began to find their way into folklore, and it is often thought that the grey man was a part of a grouping of grey people. In fact, as you may have managed to piece together, culturally, the grey man of Benbecdwui has been the strongest correlation to the Native American folklore of the Sasquatch, all the way at the top of a mountain in Scotland. Who knew? The thing is though, although the ancient lore of the Highlands told tales about the strange giant folk that lived at the top of the peaks of the Cairngorms, this particular folktale still regularly emerges in recent times. In fact, dozens of contemporary figures have cited the grey man, with notable encounters beginning in 1891 and the most recent being back in 1958. You see, many climbers across the Cairngorms regularly warn of running into the grey man to this day, and the legend of the Fear Laith seemingly still lives on. Next up at number 2, Koshai the Immortal. And this guy is equal parts horrifying and equal parts comically awesome. And in fact, Koshai the Immortal, also known as Koshai the Deathless, is one of the most prolific figures in Russian and Slavic folklore, often filling the role of the big bad archetypal male antagonist to many of their mythologies and cautionary tales. Koshai the Immortal serves as the masculine counterpart to the terrifying Baba Yaga, the woods witch that roams the wild in her hut built upon the legs of a giant chicken. Isn't folklore awesome? Although Koshai is a malevolent, formless entity, he often appears as a gaunt, bony, grizzled old wizard with a long grey beard clutching a sharp, serpentine dagger. In many folk tales, Koshai was depicted as riding naked throughout the wild on the back of a giant white stallion, searching for young women to kidnap and take back to his evil citadel in the dark parts of the wilderness. The thing is though, although his origins are relatively unknown, the most common proponent of Koshai's lore is the spell that he cast upon himself to make himself immortal. As the legend goes, Koshai the Immortal has buried his soul inside a series of nested objects that he has hidden far away on a remote island. On the island stands a tall oak tree, and at the bottom of the oak tree is a large oak chest. Buried inside the chest is a large hare, and within the hare is the corpse of a duck, and within the duck is an egg, and hidden within the egg is a tiny needle that contains Koshai's soul. Throughout Slavic legend, no one even came close to figuring out where his soul was hidden, and because of that he was free to continue his malevolent reign for all eternity. Also, a little side note, but in one of the greatest video games ever created, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, an evil frost mage named Koshai is the main villain. So there you go, another reason to play The Witcher. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the Curie. And this one is incredibly interesting because this particular folk legend comes from a very interesting part of England, Devon, an ancient place steeped in its own unique folklore and mystery, and perhaps its most horrifying folklore monster is the Curie. As the legend goes, out on the vast and bleak moors of Dartmoor, many people throughout the ages were lured away by the mythical will o' the wisps, bright lights that transfix travellers and turn them to stray off the path where they would ultimately meet their deaths. By those ancient graves, a strange dark demonic creature known as a Curie would manifest, where it would wait for passers-by and then latch on to their necks. Once the Curie had you, over the course of several weeks, it would slowly convince you that it was real by whispering violent and evil thoughts into your ear. Sometimes you would dream of its existence, and as you dreamt, you'd feel a cold touch on the back of your neck. Gradually over time, its presence would start to become more and more apparent, and at night it would grab your leg, it would attack you in your dreams, it would change the face of your family members when you were talking to them into a dark, twisted vision of itself. The Curie is a creation of pure evil, and it would never make itself known to anyone else, forcing you to question your own sanity. And that's when the Curie had you. As you pled to be let go, it would start bargaining with you, and it will promise you that if you return to the graves on the moors, you'll be free from its evil grasp and the torment will be over. Well, of course, once you did that, the Curie would tell you that the grave is just a few steps further, but eventually, of course, you'd never reach your destination, and eventually your body would succumb to exhaustion out on the moors as the Curie kept you alive long enough to watch your body deteriorate in the elements, where a new grave would form for the next victim. Yeah, if you're ever in Devon, guys, steer clear of the moors at night. It's a nice place though.
Coming in at 5, Arlington's Screaming Bridge. Now this Texas legend will quite honestly make your hair stand on end. Legend has it that one full night more than 50 years ago, several teens were carpooling home after their high school football game. Still riled up over the victory, driving responsibly definitely wasn't of utmost importance to the young teens. The bridge running through Arlington's River Legacy Park was just wide enough for one car at a time. You can probably guess where this is going. The teens hooting and hollering drowned out all the noise, like that of a vehicle that had no working headlights. The cars collided head-on before erupting in a fiery explosion and plunging into the waters below. Nobody survived. The bridge is now closed to vehicular traffic, with the site only accessed on foot. However, it now has a new name gifted to it by locals, Screaming Bridge, a name which was coined after the first brave souls went exploring along the bridge and experienced events that can only be explained by the supernatural. Legend has it, if you stand on the bridge and gaze into the river below, you'll see a tombstone for each of the deceased with their names, date of birth, and death. Visit at midnight on the anniversary and you'll hear two cars screeching towards each other before colliding. Coming in at 4, the nurse at Bexar County Hospital. If you ever find yourself in Texas, whatever you do not find yourself at the dilapidated Bexar County Hospital, because it is supposedly housing the spirit based on an American serial killer called Janine Jones. Now, the real-life killer is responsible for the deaths of up to 60 infants and children in her care as a licensed vocational nurse during the 1970s and 1980s. In 1994, she was convicted of murder and was sentenced to 99 years in prison with triple credit. Now, the legend of the nurse at Bexar County Hospital is similar treading, with legend stating that a murderous spirit used to wander the halls killing patients in order of their room number, first 201, then 202, 203, 204. It began in one ward where patients all began asking about one particular nurse. However, when the staff checked the security camera, they found the patients speaking to seemingly no one. They saw the curtains close on their own. Tracheotomy tubes get pulled out by an unseen force, but then, very quickly, the patients began dying in their room number order. Like I said, many Bexar County locals believe the legend to be based off of Janine Jones, but what do you guys think?
Coming in at number 3, we've got the Alp. This creature originates in German folklore and can cause you all sorts of terrible problems. Some liken it to a vampire, others to demons like the incubus. It will visit people at night and sit on their bodies, although they don't usually attempt to initiate sexual acts like incubi and succubi. If the person doesn't wake up, the Alp will often hop into their dreams and control what they see. It's not common for them to give people good dreams either. Nope, it's nightmares end to end. One of the many sleep paralysis demons that exist, the Alp tends to want to cause mischief in as many ways as possible. So it's not necessarily going to kill you or end your suffering anytime soon. It wants to keep the party going. Dream visits and nightmare manipulation are only part of what makes an Alp scary and annoying. It drinks blood from people's nipples and plays all sorts of heinous pranks, from spoiling milk to rediapering babies to tying up horses' tails into knots. These little gremlins are indeed the worst, and they can shapeshift too, so don't expect to just see a little goblin hopping around. It might be a little trickier than that. Don't count on reading Nilbog backwards to save your butt either. What a bag of fun they are. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Jormungand. This giant snake lives in the ocean surrounding Midgard. It is so large that it encompasses the entire world and then eats its own tail. As I previously mentioned, it's the sibling of Fenrir, which is kind of odd considering that one is a wolf and one is a snake, but hey, Loki definitely got around. Jormungand is famous for its rivalry with Thor. The two would engage in many legendary battles over the years. One of said tales has Thor fishing in the sea for the serpent. He snags it and starts pulling. As it gets closer to the surface, the giant Mir becomes terrified. He sees Jormungand dribbling blood and poison and decides to cut the line, sending the snake back down to the depths. Thor was not happy about this development. Later on, of course, the two meet during Ragnarok. One telltale sign that Ragnarok is coming is the violent unrest of the seas. This happens because our slippery pal here has released his tail from his mouth and begins to flop onto land. Once this happens, it will spit poison to fill half the earth. The snake and the god do battle, with Thor emerging victorious but then succumbing to poison. Lose, fellas, that's not how we wanted this to go. Another fun fact about this gigantic serpent is that continental Germans used to attribute earthquakes to its movements, which is especially terrifying in context. Imagine you're a German peasant and an earthquake rolls through. Your house, rubble, your wife pancaked, your crops shaken, not stirred. And what explanation do you have? Oh, a snake bigger than anything you could ever imagine. Cool. Good. Glad to know that there's something just slithering around beneath us and could surface at any moment. Definitely not living the rest of my peasant life in crippling fear. And at number 1, we've got Balor. When your people have an eternal, mythological, supernaturally powerful enemy, life can be rough. Dealing with the leader of said eternal, mythological, supernatural group of entities can be really hard, and that's what Balor is. Leader of the Fomorians and a malevolent force beyond comprehension, this enormous eyeball has been described in myths and legends passed down from the first Celtic settlers. This demonic tribe constantly showed up, bringing the deadliest of natural forces along to cause doom and destruction all throughout Ireland. Plenty of battles were fought between these demons and the folks who just wanted to keep existing, but the deadliest of all is Balor. A gigantic fiend with strength beyond measure, Balor was a sight to behold. However, you didn't want to look directly at him. He had an enormous eyeball, rumored to be poisonous, that would turn the tide of any skirmish. It was so big, in fact, that it required a team of servants to manually open and close it. Anyone who he pointed said humongous eyeball at would perish, and this became a keystone weapon in the Fomorian arsenal. For ages, these demons dominated the Celtic settlers, forcing them back and preventing them from truly taking hold of the land. However, there was a prophecy that did not bode well for the demonic tribe. Apparently, his grandson would one day strike him down and dethrone the Fomorians in one decisive blow. This giant eye did everything that it could to prevent this from happening though. Hiding his daughter away to prevent her from ever bearing children, Balor was careful not to let any grandchildren make it onto the scene. However, a priestess managed to sneak a human hero into her quarters and this man seduced the woman, resulting in triplets, only one of which survived. And wouldn't you know it, the surviving sibling grew up to be the heroic Lou Lamfada. Lou was an ace with the good old slingshot and managed to get his granddad right in the eye. Something about slingshots and giant eyeballs in mythology, eh? This bullseye was enough to down the legendary giant, forcing the rest of the Fomorians back into the sea, finally freeing the humans from years of terror. We haven't heard much from them since, so maybe they're waiting for another leader with a power as strong as the poisonous eye. But in the meantime, things seem to be pretty good in Ireland, you know, for now.
Number 5 on this list is El Chupacabra. You guys should know who El Chupacabra is by this point, considering we've talked about this creature tons on this channel before. Basically, it is a legendary creature in the Central Americas that's said to drink the blood of livestock. Although this creature seems like it's probably fake, it might be real, just not exactly how we might expect it to be. Carolyn Beccia says, "We are taught from an early age, don't approach scary looking dogs. And while no one can get a clear picture of Bigfoot, the Kraken, or the Loch Ness Monster, there is one monster that is oddly not camera shy, the legendary El Chupacabra. The Chupacabra was first sighted in Puerto Rico in the 70s. A wave of sightings followed in the late 1990s. During this time, livestock throughout Puerto Rico was found drained of blood. These Chupacabra, or goat sucker attacks, caused panic with local residents who claimed a vampire was feeding on their livestock. Although descriptions have varied, most describe a hairless, alien-like monster with spikes going down its back and glowing red eyes. It sounds dubious, but how could so many people be taking pictures of the same ugly dog-like creature? The answer may be one found in science. One plausible theory is that these creatures are coyotes suffering from sarcoptic mange, an inflammatory skin condition caused by the itch-inducing parasite mite scabies. Wolves, dogs, and coyotes infected with scabies will have extreme hair loss, skin shriveling, and constricted blood vessels that can lead to life-threatening fatigue. And while usually a coyote or wolf will have no problems hunting prey, once infected by sarcoptic mange, coyotes may choose to hunt more available meals such as livestock. So it's actually possible that this creature is real, it's just not what we thought at all. I know that this takes away from some of the mystery and lore around it, but ultimately this would make a lot of sense. When you think about it, what's more likely? A space alien comes crashing to Earth and starts sucking the blood of our livestock, or some coyotes get a disease and start doing it instead? I tend to side with the coyotes. Either way though, that doesn't make these coyotes nice or friendly or approachable. Still treat them like you would a chupacabra, with caution. Number 4 on this list is the Stymphalian birds. We gotta go all the way back to ancient Greece for this one. Caroline Betchius says one of Hercules' labors was to kill the Stymphalian birds, man-eating birds who had the peculiar habit of throwing dung. The Greeks were not the only ones who liked to scare their youngsters with killer bird tales. The Maori tribe of New Zealand told similar legends of the Pokie or Haikoi, a giant black and white bird that swooped down from the sky to pick off small children. Scientists today know that these thunderbirds existed. Called Haast's eagle, the bird stood over 6 feet tall and had a wingspan of over 8 feet. The Haast eagle would sit atop trees and then ambush its prey by swooping down at 60-mile-per-hour speeds. Then it would disembowel its meal with sharp talons before the poor slob could even worry about dung throwing. Hercules would never have survived to these hellbirds, but you can sleep well tonight. The Haast's eagle went extinct around the 15th century. Anything that could annihilate Hercules would definitely be a no-go for me, guys. That dude was literally a demigod, and if these guys could have beaten him, then we wouldn't have stood a chance. Lucky for us, they are extinct now, but for the people back then, they would have had their hands full with these creatures. If, of course, they still had hands and the beast hadn't ripped them off yet.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Tsuchigumo. Monsters have been mashed for as long as we can remember, and it's not always a graveyard smash, mind you. Sometimes it's the combination of many real, living creatures to make something extra nightmarish. Manticores, chimeras, ligers. Maybe that last one is real, but I bounce between Napoleon Dynamite and Joe Exotic for opinions on the mystical status of a lion tiger crossbreed. Back to the Tsuchigumo though. This is a beast with the body of a tiger, the limbs of a spider, and the face of a demon. Part real mammal, part real, albeit much smaller arachnid, part mythical monster. Hell yeah, I want to fight this in a video game. But if I'm not behind an LCD screen with a super powerful video game avatar, I don't think I'd ever want to cross one of these. Apparently Tsuchigumo were known for eating travelers as they made their way across the countryside. In the remote fields, no one can hear you scream. 1 or 2 traveling morsels wasn't enough either. In one tale, a powerful warrior took one down and sliced it open, you know, to loot the body. We're back in the video game world, of course. And inside, there were 1,990 skulls. 10 shy of 2,000. That's a prolific people eater. Coming in at number 2, we've got Jorogumo. If you've ever seen the Spookies, you'll know that the best monster in the ridiculous mishmash is a spider woman. Now, the monster who drains the puppeteer dry and the Jorogumo aren't identical, but they do share the 2 major components of spider women. The spider part and the woman part. Deep analysis, I know. But getting trapped in a sticky web and having all your fluids drained, not fun. In fact, it sounds like a terrible time. For some. I feel like maybe some people might enjoy it. This is why arachnid gals are the worst. The Jorogumo is an ancient creature with depictions dating all the way back to the Edo period in Japan. Its upper half is that of a beautiful woman, while the lower half is hairy spider legs. We've all been there, right? It will lure men to a shack in the middle of nowhere, snare their prey in a web, and then eat them alive. Apparently, when a spider hits year 400, it gains magical transformative powers. I don't know what kinds of spiders usually live that long, but who am I to judge a creature with that much longevity? I probably won't make it till 50. In addition to some Jorogumo using their feminine charm to trap men, there are also versions that will manipulate good folks before devouring them. These spider women will show up with what seems to be a baby, begging for help. Soft-hearted people spring at the opportunity to help this poor mother and end up being torn apart by thousands of freshly hatched spider babies. You ever seen a spider nest ready to burst? Oh no, 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 no. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Teke Teke. A more modern piece of Japanese folklore, but with enough scare factor and staying power to top today's list. This is the tale of a girl who fell on the train tracks and was cut in half by a passing train. Somehow she was left alive and continued to survive even when her torso was completely separated from her legs. The upper half of this poor gal stalks the night, attacking commuters and dooming them to the same fate. Sometimes she'll cut the train goers in half herself, using a sickle of some sorts. Other times she'll just force them onto the tracks so they can experience a train running them over too. One might wonder where the name Teke Teke comes from, and like a lot of Japanese folklore, it originates from onomatopoeia. See, this half-person's exposed spine scratches against the pavement and makes a very distinctive sound. And in Japan, that sound is characterized as Teke Teke. Yes, she's named after bones being dragged across concrete. That's hardcore. More than probably any of the other entries on this list, Teke Teke makes regular appearances in horror movies, manga, and anime. And it really feels like a modern tale too, much more gruesome and human. Plus, the member of disfigurement is based entirely in modern technology.
Kicking off at number 5, the Gjenganger. And our first entry heads us off to Norway, Sweden and Denmark, as this particular undead revenant has been morphed and shaped into a few different depictions throughout the history of Scandinavia. Now, although the Draugr of Scandinavian legend is perhaps their most prolific of folklore abominations, and this particular entry functions in a similar way, the Gjenganger likes to do things a little differently. Derived from the prefix Gjen, which roughly translates to forward or towards, and then Ganga, which is derived from a word meaning foot or walk. The Gjenganger roughly translates to walking after death. And I needn't say no more to give you guys an idea about where this one's going, right? As the legend goes, the Gjenganger were the corpses of the dead that had reason to return to the mortal plane. Usually, people that had been murdered or people that had committed suicide would return to their town and village after clawing their way from their own graves. Throughout the Viking Age, the Gjenganger were seen throughout several sagas, such as the Grettis and the saga of Eric the Red. Here, much like the Draugr, they were often slayed and easily defeated by their heroes. But in a more contemporary setting, as Scandinavia became Christianized, the Gjenganger became a sort of undead, violent zombie vampire that would break into the homes of their unsuspecting victims to spread disease. Whilst they were sleeping, they would attack people with their Dodin Keniep, which translates to the dead man's pinch, and when they awoke, their victim's skin would be sunken and blue, infected by the plague of the Gjenganger. That's not very nice. Swinging in at number 4, the Liko. And for this one, we're heading over to the most intriguing, captivating and equally terrifying kingdom of Slavic mythology and folklore, which, other than Celtic, comes in as one of my personal favourite European folktales. Because we've all got a list of that, right? Now, Slavic lore is mainly focused on the balance of good and bad luck, and the Liko is perhaps the personification of the latter as the cultural embodiment of all evil and misfortune. Otherwise known as the Licho or Liho in several other Eastern European countries, the Liko is often described as an elderly woman dressed entirely in black, with one distinctive, terrifying eye peering out of her darkened veil. In other versions, the Liko also appear as a male goblin-like creature that is often found perching on tree branches or farmers' fences, peering silently at its victim. That's a pretty creepy image, right? In ancient times, the Liko was often thought to be a servant of death itself, and any quiet appearance that it made would mark the end of their days for whoever first glimpsed it, and in many cases, even entire villages. During pre-Christian times, Slavic villages would conduct a ritual to ward off the Liko during times of plague and famine, where they'd carve a feminine-like idol with one eye and then burn it on a pyre in an effort to combat the malevolence of the native Liko. In one particular tale, a local blacksmith was beset upon by a Liko, but just as she was about to eat him, he bargained with her that he was a legendary crafter and could forge for her anything that she liked. She chose an eye, so she could finally have two to see with, and the blacksmith agreed. He told her that he'd have to bind her down whilst he hammered in the new eye so that she didn't make any sudden movements, and when the Liko was securely tied to the chair, the blacksmith shoved a red-hot poker through the Liko's one good eye. That's one way to do it, right?
Coming in at 3, Summit Elementary School. In Amarillo, Texas, there's a haunting legend surrounding a closed and abandoned school that everyone avoids. The Summit Elementary School is one of the most haunted locations in all of Texas, and its dark history makes it a hub for ghosts and spirits alike. The school was open up until 1972 and is haunted for numerous reasons, including a janitor who killed students and stuck them in the boiler, racially motivated murders that took place in the school, and murdered prostitutes hidden in the walls. These are just a few of the legends surrounding the terrifying building. Worse still, legend has it that if you're brave enough to visit the abandoned school at night, your car may do strange things. Swings will move by themselves, and you might even hear voices coming from the walls. Honestly, this school is beginning to sound like the one from Marianne, which is a French horror series you all need to watch immediately. Do it. The Queen demands it. Coming in at 2, the Candy Lady. Now, this very well might be one of the scariest urban legends I've ever read, and may result in a lot of you sleeping with the light on tonight. Sorry in advance. This theory goes, I quote, "The Candy Lady allegedly lures children to their doom by leaving enticing goodies on their windowsills just before bedtime. Her plan is for the kids to wait for mum and dad to fall asleep before indulging in the sweet treats so as not to get in trouble. Afterwards, she'll grab them and feast on their sugar-laden blood until until there isn't any left. Children began to go missing, yet no leads were ever found that would suggest they were kidnapped or ran away. As some of the remaining children got older, they confessed to eating candy left on their windowsills with a note from the candy lady, so parents started to wonder if the other children perhaps had been poisoned. The worry was soon put to rest when someone actually turned up dead. Not a child though, but a sheriff's deputy who had been investigating the disappearances. His eyes had been stabbed out with a fork, and his pockets stuffed with candy. A farmer also found a child-sized set of teeth inside a candy wrapper one morning while tending to his fields. Very creepy. The legend still remains in Texas, and whenever children go missing, people are very quick to blame the candy lady. And finally coming in at number 1, black-eyed children. Black-eyed children or black-eyed kids are a contemporary legend of supposed paranormal creatures that resemble children between the ages of 6 and 16 with pale skin and black eyes who are reportedly seen hitchhiking or are encountered on doorsteps of residential homes. Now, children are creepy already. They say strange things and their innocence allows them to breach the barrier between the living and the dead that we jaded adults just don't possess. However, the black-eyed children legend is one for the history books and is downright terrifying. In the late 90s, a journalist named Brian Bethel was working in his town of Abilene, Texas, when he encountered something he'll never forget. He was parked outside a movie theater when 2 children knocked on his window. Brian couldn't quite understand why, but he was completely overcome with fear at the sight of them. He rolled down the window regardless, and the kids asked him for a ride back to their home so that they could get cash for the movie. His fear, however, made him hesitate, but the children were persistent. They then began to say some weird things, like, "We're not armed" or anything. Brian looked back at the kids and noticed how their eyes had turned pitch black. They then began screaming at him that they could only come in the car if he invited them in, so he quickly drove away. He spread the word about the black-eyed children and was surprised when a lot of other people came forward reporting similar experiences.